Well, welcome to the wonderful book of Numbers. We just got through with Leviticus. What did we say about that one? Kind of tedious and repetitive. Now we're in the wonderful book of Numbers. They gave us 10 chapters to look at. There was a time when I was obsessed with reading the Bible through. I couldn't stop. It was addictive. It was like eating cake. I do it every day. I've read through the Bible so many times. I don't know what happened. I can't hardly do it anymore. Can't read. I can do 10 chapters of the New Testament, but 10 chapters of Leviticus just to read through. 10 chapters of Numbers. Oh my goodness, it's hard. Now, back when I used to read through the Bible all the time, it was all right reading through Leviticus and Numbers. Looked forward to it, and I still look forward to it. I just don't have the stamina. I don't know if that's an age thing or focus. Maybe that's an age thing, and I don't know, but it's hard. But there are some good lessons to learn from Leviticus and the book of Numbers. I like to think when you're looking at some of them Old Testament things, they teach us about God. How does God think? Well, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You want to know how your God thinks? There's 5 books right there. Well, the whole Bible does that, but you want to know what God expects? You want to know how God rolls? You roll. How do you roll? What puts you to bed at night? What gets you up in the morning? What do you do? What makes your day go? You want to know how God rolls? The Law of Moses is a good place to start. So I like to read. Years ago, back when I used to read the Bible, I still read the Bible. I just can't do it as much as I used to. I'm being a preacher for over 20 years now. I start sermonizing immediately. Where do you start? Well, okay, Numbers chapter. We're going to do 10 chapters of Numbers. All right, Numbers chapter 1, verse 1. Well, I find myself there an hour later. That same verse ain't moved. So that doesn't help. But I hope you read through it. And, it crossed my mind, why don't the Lord say, write it like we would today. Like here's the 12 tribes, firstborn to secondborn, boom, 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 boom. But no, he's got to be beget, 70, and, and it's just so repetitive. Well, just say it once and then, I think there's a reason for that. God knows how we think. He knows we need to hear something over and over and over again to get it. I do anyway. Just ask my wife. Honey, where's the so-and-so? Honey, I've told you 1,000 times. It's in the... Well, what's she mean by that? I need to hear it over and over and over again. Now, she don't. She remembers things. I can't remember anything. So we're in the book of Numbers. A lot of lessons to learn. And we're most certainly no way going to get to all of them. And I used to fret over, that a little bit, how much of that. We'll just get to whatever we get to. How about that in the time that we have? But it's the camp of Israel. We all know who Israel is. That's God's chosen people. God chose them to make his name great. God chose them to show the world how the Lord rolls. God chose them to show the world what God expects. He used those people. And he got them out of Israel. They went on a 40-year camping trip. Shouldn't have been 40 years, but it ended up being 40 years. You know the story. Well, you'll know the story by the time we're done with this quarterly. That's a long camping trip, isn't it? I don't know about you, but when I go camping, if I have a 3-day camp set, ready, I'm ready the first day to get back home. So these guys camped for 40 years. So the camp of Israel. But you know who organized the camp? God organized the camp according to His purposes, according to His will. No, you know who had any say in it? Nobody. That's what we'll learn from our text that we're looking at the next few weeks in the book of Numbers. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, then what? Deuteronomy is it's a little bit easier. Still repetitive, but there's a lot of good stuff in Deuteronomy as well. But so, are you with me? I believe you're with me when when I say it's hard, tedious, can be boring. Matter of fact, when I saw the lessons, I was like, "Oh my goodness, really?" Okay, I'm going to read 10 chapters in Numbers, and then I sat down dreading it. But as I start reading, what happens? You're like, "Oh man, I love the book of Numbers." But it's the title of the lesson today is the Camp of Israel, and I think we should be aware of who organized that 40-year camping trip. Where are you going to camp? Where are you going to go to next in camp? How long are we going to camp at this particular area? Well, God organized all that in His wisdom, in His foreknowledge, in His omnipotence. What is it? Omnipotence? Omniscience and omnipresent? Something like that. All powerful. That's what all that means. All knowing, all powerful, and all present. That's what God is. And based on what He knows, He said, this is how I want you to organize your camp. Of probably 3 to 5 million, depending on who you're talking to. I wouldn't argue with any of them. 3 million is a bunch. 5 million is a bunch as well. I think of those. I used to go to pro sporting events there in Arizona. There'd be 40,000 people in one of them stadiums. 40,000. Could you imagine 3 to 5 million? It got a little hectic in those sometimes. Dangerous occasionally. Scary. Trying to get out of there or in there. But 3 to 5 million people. God organized here's how you 3 to 5 million people are going to go into the promised land. I'm leading you out of Egypt, out of the bondage. I'm leading you into the promise. Here's how you're going to do it. And then we have the meticulous way that He had done it. One thing that we ought to get from reading those 5 books of the law of Moses is we cannot do what God expects us to do. We can't do it. There's only been one man who was able to do that. His name was Jesus. He could do it, showed the rest of us that we couldn't do it, and showed the rest of us that we needed Him. We have to have Him. And you know what I say? The camp of Israel represents Christ. The tabernacle represents Jesus. The names of the 12 sons of Jacob are all prophetic. That's pretty neat. That also reminds me, when you read the lists of the 12 sons, there's several lists in the Bible. I looked at a lot of them, all of them that I could find. And none of them are the same, the list. You'd think it'd be from the oldest to the youngest, like you read about in Genesis 29 through 35, the 12 sons of Jacob. You know that story? But after that, the list is different. Tribe sizes are different. And then go over to Revelation, you find them tribes. You can't even find some of those tribes in the list of the tribes in the Revelation. So, but know this: God is a God of order. He knows what He's doing. Let me tell you what God never banked on. It's the size of the army of the children of Israel. What do we learn from the Bible? God used Gideon and his how many men? 300 to cause the army of 150,000 men to go berserk, kill themselves. 300. Think that movie, The 300 Spartans. That's a true story, kind of, but the movie's probably crazy. But all the 300 Spartans died. I wonder if they know that none of Gideon's 300 died. But anyway, God used 300 men to take out a big army. So, but why? Well, then why did God number the armies, number the troops, number the fighting men? He ordered them by their numbers to camp in a certain way around the tabernacle. But before we get into our text, turn to Psalm 33. Psalm 33. This is something we should never forget. Does the Bible say that God can bless by few or bless by many? I ain't making that up, because I seen a whole lot of heads shaking. Yeah, y'all read it. Slipped my mind where that is. 33rd Psalm. Look at verse 16. This is the truth, right? The Word of God. There is no king saved by the multitude of an host. There is what? No king. Huh? What does that tell you about the kings of the earth? Maybe we should meddle in our own business and let God deal with the earth and the world and the kingdoms of this world. He knows what He's doing. The things that are going on right now are not out of God's control. This is the Satan system that we do live in the world, but that is in the hands of the Lord. It will not get out of control. He is letting it do what it needs to be done to prove a certain point that we're going to have to wait to find out about one of these days. Further along, we'll know all about it. Ain't that the song? Someday we'll what? We'll understand why. It says here that no king is saved by the multitude of an host. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. A horse is a vain thing for safety. Neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. You know, a horse, if I've learned correctly, back in the old days when they used to fight off horseback, would run right smack straight into swords and spears like they weren't even there, get cut down. The best thing they could do is when they died is fall on 3 or 4 guys. Took them out. A horse is a vain thing. It has a lot of strength, but I'm going to tell you right now, it take me, who's got congestive heart failure, a whole host of other problems, take me about a half a second to kill a horse right now. Any horse. You want to go on me with if I know what's coming, that is. All that power that horse has, I can take it out real quick. They have great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear Him, upon them that hope in His mercy. You want to know a truly strong person is somebody who has hope in the Almighty God. going to talk a little bit about that in my sermon this morning. So let's try to move on. Verse 19, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waiteth for the Lord, the psalmist writes. He is our help and our shield. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Let thy mercy, O Lord, be upon us, according as we hope in thee. You know who King David wrote that psalm? Remember, King David was a little bitty shepherd boy. Well, the first thing we learn about him. What's the first, when you think of King David, little shepherd boy, I don't know how old he was. I don't know how big he was. He was a ruddy red, whatever that means. When you think, what did he do? What did David do? So does David know what he's talking about? He's out there, a little shepherd boy. They watch 10 sheep, make sure the sheep go where they need to go to eat what they need to eat. Went up against a giant, a mighty giant, a man, a warrior, a Philistine, not just a regular Philistine, a huge Philistine, covered in armor, spear and bow, mighty man. What did David do? Who won? Little David. So does David not know what he's talking about when he wrote the 33rd Psalm? So you don't think David didn't read the first 5 books of the Bible? He didn't know the law of Moses? Yes, he did. The Bible said kings were to sit down and write the law of Moses. That's the first thing they were supposed to do when they became king. So yeah, he knew the law of Moses. He read through the book of Numbers. But then we have that holy man who wrote what we just read in Psalm 33. I Google searched. I do that a lot. You know, you go on an old-timey preacher's study and he got books. He'll have them all in his desk to be covered in books. So I got all them same books right there on Google, most of them. And I Google searched, and I just searched the Jacob's sons, oldest to youngest. Here's what I got. Here's what Google. I don't know who answered it. I don't remember, but here's what the first one, not the first one, but one that I came up to. It says, Jacob had 12 sons through 4 women. His wives, Leah and Rachel, and his concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah, who were in order of their birth, oldest to youngest, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. You remember Joseph and Benjamin? Remember what happened to Joseph? They thought they wrote him off. And then Jacob had another little boy named Benjamin. But Joseph wasn't dead. Y'all remember the story. We went and studied that not too long ago. That's the order you find. But you won't find that order anymore. That's the exact order in the Bible anymore. So when it comes to Numbers and the names, I think God lists them in the order of holy. Not holy, but those who were least troublesome to him to the worst troublesome to him. And he ordered them to, he numbered them, and you all read, I don't know if you read the 10 chapters of Numbers. I don't know if you did or not. I did. It was tough. But I got to admit, I read it fast. I had to force myself to, read through there, catch some highlights. But chapter 1 of Numbers, if you would turn there with me. Chapter 1 of Numbers, and we're going to look at a few scriptures, verse 1 through 3. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of the congregation on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel after their families, by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls. By their polls. That word poll is an interesting word. I don't know if y'all care. But it literally means skull. By their polls. If you want to put literal, you'd say by their skulls. What would we say in America today? A what count? That's all that simply means. That's Old English for you. I like Old English, but I don't like Old English. I don't know. I just love-hate thing with that Old English. By their skull, take a head count. From 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel, thou and Aaron shall number them by their armies. 24 years old, and so everybody 20 years old and upward were in the army. No. What's it say? Those who were what? Able. So I got news for you. Don't send me to war. I'd just be in the way. The young men would just have to trip over me. So 20 years old up until the point where up until they could fight, till they couldn't fight anymore. And I don't know how old that was. I suspect they was older guys. I bet they could throw down in them days. They were healthy in them days. They weren't carb junkies. They didn't sit around and fantasize watching army movies. You know, they didn't glorify violence. They were hard-working men. They worked outside. They were agricultural. They could swing a pick. They could swing an axe. They could swing a sickle. So from 20 years old up until they can't fight anymore. It's hard to get an accurate count of the size of Israel based on those kind of scriptures. Well, if there's 6, they claim, based on what we just read, there are about 603,550 men able to go to war in Israel in those days. Capable of warfare. But what did we just read about that? The multitude of hosts is not that important. You know, I did a little bit of looking. I don't know if you care. But America has 332,403,650 people in it. Israel was 3 to 5 million. So it kind of gives you an idea of how the size of Israel compared to, say, the United States today. 3 to 5 million compared to 332 million. Our active army has 1,417,370. So the army that they numbered in Israel of the 3 to 5 million, there was 600,000. That's about half as many as we have in our 330-something million people. That's a pretty good size. That's active military. We have a reserve of 857,261. I mean, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? And it is. But look at compared to, do the percentages. Israel has 600 and something thousand man army. America has a little over 1 million man army. But look at the size of the countries. Just for general information. I think we can learn a lot about that. I don't think maybe we ought to not send boys in the war until they're 20 years old, based on what we've learned from it. I think that'd be a good practice. It's not that 17, 18, 19-year-olds can't throw down. They can. But their brains are not quite developed, and they see things, and they process things, and they arrange things in their minds, and they live their life based on that. Maybe let them develop a little more. They can fight. Some of the toughest dudes I know are 19, 18. I know some 17-year-olds that whoop every man in this room right here at the same time by himself. You know what I'm saying? So, but God says, 20 years old and upward. 20-year-old back in those days was pretty mature. I'm very mature 20-year-olds today are not as mature as 20-year-olds were back in these days. I tell you what we are nowadays is mama's boys. Mama's little babies. They weren't mama's boys in these days. So to get an idea of the size of the army, 600 and something thousand men, 20 years old upward, able to go to war compared to America. So I just, mull those numbers over. We got bombs, though. They can drop a bomb and kill 100 people. One bomb. One guy drop a bomb. One guy launches one bomb, kills 100 men. Warfare is a whole lot different now than it was in those days. In those days, it was hand-to-hand, eyeball to eyeball type. But God numbered them according to the 20 year. He also numbered. There's also other numbers in the book of Numbers. Well, I just wanted to focus on that one. Go down to verse 47 of chapter 1. This is interesting. But the Levites, after the tribe of their families, were not numbered among them. You know what the Levites were not? Part of the army. Bunch of sissies. Bunch of wimps. I didn't find it or write it down. You'd be wrong if you was thinking that about Levites. Matter of fact, go home and read it. Wherever Levite girded on his sword, you can see what he did. It might have been in our reading. I can't remember. Levites were not a part of the regular military. They weren't even counted. Those men weren't. So you had the tabernacle. Right around the tabernacle, were the Levites. And then you have these other tribes in a cross shape, by the way, that were numbered around the tabernacle. The Levites always led out, and then God is a God of order. I don't believe in God. I was watching something on the internet where this guy was in Russia. He's a Russian. And he just went on the street, where a lot of people were, and he just randomly asked them, "Do you believe in God?" Every person. That's the only question. Or no, do you believe in religion? That's what he asked them. About a third of them said, "I'm an atheist." Another third said they were Christian. And the other third said they were Muslim. Now, there's a few others that were in there. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. I don't remember. Anyway, they do the same thing in America. Most people, third atheist, third Christian, and then third weird stuff. People in America are weird. We're weird in America. But the Levites they went out, and then everybody else went out behind the Levites, and the first thing they did is pick up the tabernacle and put it away in order. That's what I was talking about. In order. People don't like God. They think God, if there is a God, there's something wrong with him. Why don't he do this? Is he all powerful? Then why don't he do this and this and this? You know what God gave us? Order. You look around. Every human being on this earth sees the same moon, same sun. There's 4 jet streams that run around this earth. 2 up here, 2 up here going this way, and 2 below going this way. You know how long it's been doing that? God gave us perfection. What have we done with it? What do we do with it? I don't think God's to blame. I think God's going to say, somehow, some way he's going to say, "Look, here, I gave you this. What have you done with it?" So God is a God of order. You see it plainly in the universe and the earth and the creation in Genesis. And now you're seeing it again with the tabernacle. And the people that surround the tabernacle. And his people that he ordered the camp. You see that order. Oh, Getting late. Go to Numbers chapter 2. I'll chase a rabbit here. It's mind-boggling to me that in America, in the Christianity, we have priests. I had a Mexican boy call me Padre one time because he knew I was a missionary Baptist preacher. So he called me Padre. You know what they call their priests? You know what that means? I am not a priest. I am not a Levite. My family tree probably split out of Asia or Africa somewhere. And then made their way both through Ireland and Scotland and things like that. Made it down here to the States, and there's Indian. Some 2 or 3 kinds of Indians in my family tree. So I'm not a priest. Preachers are not priests. I didn't know how to take that Padre. What else would he call me? What does he know about preachers? His preachers. What is he, Catholic? So me being a preacher, what's he going to call me? Padre. The Levites didn't go to war. They took care of the what? Now, in that respect, I am more concerned with this church than I am myself, as far as that goes. If I wasn't, I'd have a job and a nice house and a nice boat and a nice vehicle, take nice vacations. Now, as far as that goes, that's, in my mind, being a preacher, a pastor, a Bible teacher, I have to dial in on that. If I had to go to war, or if I had to go to make a living, I guarantee, and a lot of preachers do it. Some preachers are bivocational. They work, and then they find time to study. I am so thankful. I don't know how my study would be if I had to get up and punch a clock for somebody. The Lord it's been worked out in my life where I don't have to do that. Thank goodness. The quicker you can get a pastor out of the workforce, the better he'll be able to pastor. I think we can learn that from these Levites. These guys were chosen, called, and special. They're not to be like they're not with y'all. They're taking care of this business right here. The business of the holy tabernacle. This is not a tabernacle. I have got into this debate, and we're not going to be able to get into too much more of this lesson if I don't stop. I get some funny looks from people. I might get some from you. A lot of times people won't let me finish. That's the way our world is. We're wound up. We just blow up. We don't listen. We don't have time to listen. But not one guy, but several preachers I have talked to called this building the house of God. Not this particular building, but church houses, the house of God. I said, it's not the house of God. Well, yeah, it is. It's the house of God. I said, no, it's not the house of God. Really? Yeah, really. I said, would you put a toilet in the house of God? Oh, then you see the wheels rolling in the brain. I said, there are toilets in that building right there. And you want to say this is the house of God? What are you doing putting toilets in the house of God? You ain't got a toilet at your house? Oh, well, think about it too. Well, who's the house of God today? This bunch sitting right here. We are. Not this building. This building is the church's house. The church house. Whose house is this? This is ours, and I'm thankful for it. Ain't you? I'm glad we're sitting in here having church instead of outside under a tree, like some churches do. But the house of God can meet under a tree. The house of God can meet in a building. This is not the tabernacle. People go on sometimes about church houses being the house of God and tabernacle. No, that's all done. This is the church's house. And thank God he gave it to us. We ought to what? What is the one thing that when first time I walked in this building, I looked around this building, I was like, oh my goodness, this thing is immaculate. You know why? If you've been in my shoes for the past 20 years and been in some of the sanctuaries I have been in, which is most, by the way, and to come in here and see how refreshing this place was, it was like saying sick 'em to a dog to me. I think a church ought to take care of their house, their building. They ought to keep it clean. They ought to keep it sanitary. They ought to keep it organized. And I'm very thankful for that, for this church. So I ain't saying they're evil. Churches' houses are evil. But listen, the God's house, the tabernacle, this is not the tabernacle. I'm not a Levite priest. I'm not a padre. I'm not of the tribe of Aaron. I'm not a priest of any kind. I'm just a regular dude, all right, who appreciates the way y'all keep this building. That is wonderful to me. There are other things that I appreciate about this church. I ain't going to get into too much of it because I have about 1 minute left. Did y'all turn to Numbers chapter 2? Because I've got number 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 10 here. I don't think we're going to get to them. Let's look at this chapter 2, the camps. And the Lord, chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard. You all know what a standard is? When you think of the Dallas Cowboys, I don't know if y'all watch football, and you think of one of their helmets, what do you think? What is on the side of their helmet? A star. I guarantee you anybody here knows football knows that star. You see that star? That's a Dallas Cowboy. That's a standard. That star is their standard. How do you know who the Dallas Cowboys are? Which team is the Dallas? Well, it's the one with that gray helmet with that star on the side of it. That was their standard. I don't know what the standards were. There were 4 standards the children of Israel had. I couldn't tell you what they were. Today, when you think of a standard or a flag, an Israeli flag, what do you think of? Star of David? You going to answer all the questions? You know, a star has 5 points. What the Star of David has what? 6 points. So the standard of Israel today is what? The Star of David. So that's what it meant. That's what it means. Banner or flag. Whatever their flag was. That was their standard. I don't know what was on it. There are some pretty good wild guesses out there. And some of them pretty good, but I ain't going to get into all that right now. With the ensign. The flag with the ensign, that would be the distinguishing mark of their father's house. Far about the tabernacle of the congregation they pitch. So, are you with me on that? So, you watch some old movies about old ancient days and war, armies and wars. When you see the military coming out there in the movies, what do you see? The flags coming. So they had 4 flags, 4 sides, north, south, east, and west, 4 flags. And there were how many? There were 3 tribes under each flag, right? So get it? Verse 34 of the same chapter. And the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So they pitched by their standards. And so they set forward every one after their families according to the house of their fathers. We learned this, right? God is a God of order. Now, I don't know, they just came out of Egypt. It makes you wonder what kind of place that was, Egypt. What did they do there? What drove the religion? Was it chaotic? It was pagan, for sure. And if I've learned correctly about pagan religions, they are chaotic, spooky, scary, evil. Demonic, you might say. And then he led them out of Israel, and you see how he organized them? The order. All things should be done what? Decently and what? What things? All things. I'll quit on this. What kind of man was Jesus? You don't know what kind of man he was, but I know this. There are some little hints. They crucified him. They took his coat off of him. Y'all remember anything peculiar about that coat? Very what? Valuable. Very state of the art. I don't think Jesus was a disorderly. He didn't misconduct himself. You couldn't call the cops on him for anything. He had a nice, very expensive, it was so expensive, the soldiers that crucified him, which usually got the garments of the people they crucified, that was part of their pay, took that coat and they what? Gambled over it. They did not want to tear it up. I think Jesus was a God-honoring, a God-orderly type person. I believe he was a clean, sanitary, well-kept human being. Not like me. But what we all know, we're not Christ. But he was. So I think him growing up under the law of Moses, dying under the law of Moses, in his death, even the parting of his garment, what are you learning about him? That same God that ordered this camp right here who died, he lived right up to the day he died that way. Proper. He was a proper man. I love proper people. We live in a world that's no holds barred. People dress. I go sit there at the dollar store waiting on her to bring me some ice cream. There'd be 10 people coming there in their pajamas. Middle of the day. I don't know if that strikes other people sitting there waiting on their wife, but you're like, you couldn't get dressed. I mean, young, healthy people. You don't understand what I'm talking about. That's the norm. I've been wearing my pajamas a little bit longer in the day, more than usual lately. What's that mean?
Yeah, not out of the house, you don't.
Yeah, I don't go to the dollar store. I do have my own rules about studying Bible and what I'm going to, praying and, going to the bathroom things. I have my own rules, but I break them a lot. Thank goodness for Jesus. Thank goodness for Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Maybe we can find out a little bit about God.